And now, a show with inappropriate language. The Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week my kid is finally back in school. That's right, he's finally back for 2 half days a week, and I feel really good for him. And I also feel really good for my wife and I, who are both vaccinated and out of our 2-week windows. We should be in the clear, unless we get one of those Johnson & Johnson blood clots, but I'm hoping that we won't. A person I don't feel great for is Jimbo Morgan. From what I hear, he's not doing well right now, and I don't know the details, but it sucks for anyone going through some shit, which Jimbo is. But on top of feeling bad for Jimbo's condition, I really feel bad about putting out what looks to be some bad information in the Kent Kreitler episode. I, Kent, and countless others have credited Kent with being the first guy to grab his skis and have documentation of it. I've believed this for a while now, but while I was on spring break, I was emailed 2 images. They both show a long-haired skier very clearly grabbing his skis. One image had the skier on K2 KVC comps, and another image had him on the original extremes. I emailed back asking who the skier is, and I should have known. It was a dude I both fear and respect. One of the only people I know other than Palmer that was a pro skier, snowboarder, and mountain biker, a badass who has long bled for what is cool in skiing, Jimbo Morgan. And while I'll ask Kreitler about this, based on the images I'm looking at, sent from someone I know who was there and I trust, I believe that Jimbo Morgan was the first person to ever grab his skis. And I really need to get Jimbo on the show for some no bullshit history. And I think it's going to be a tall order to make that happen, but we're not here to talk about Jimbo Morgan right now. We're here to talk about a guy who was Jimbo Morgan's boss at one point, or everyone's boss over at K2 back in the late 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Tim Petrick has done so many things in his life and times, which creates a great podcast. But when you've done that much in your career, and you're a business episode, meaning it's not going to be a 2-part show, we pass over some things like a Jewish holiday. So we aren't going to be talking about what Tim did when he was president of the SIA, and we aren't going to talk about his Alaska injuries, his wonderful wife and 2 kids that I watched grow up a bit, but we are going to talk about some of the good stuff that will take you from where he started in New York all the way to now with Winters instructing at Jackson Hole. And Jackson Hole is a place where Teton Gravity Research was founded. And if you haven't noticed, I've been working with those guys the past few weeks, doing a little cross-promotion, which I'm really excited about. The biggest reason I'm excited now is that I have all of their movies for free, which really helps me with my podcast research. I'm part of the premium program, so I have access to all the movies, discounts to all their merchandise, and wait, there's more. With this program, you can also get access to Proform codes as well, but I haven't checked that part of the premium service out yet. But you can do so by heading over to tetongravity.com/premium and checking it out. You know who else I really want you to check out? Me, on Instagram, @The Powell Movement. I also want you to tell a friend about the show, and most important of all, please support my sponsors. They are Stanley, a brand who everyone is going to need for camping stuff this summer, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Rollerblade, Alonskis, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now, let's talk to Tim Petrick. Happy Easter. You know, religious jokes really never go well on a podcast, but since I'm Jewish, I'm going to give you my Easter joke. And Tim, why can't Jesus eat M&Ms?
I don't know.
Because they fall through the holes in his hands.
Oh, that is horrible, Mike.
It is horrible, but it's not like fundamentally against someone's principles. It's just kind of a joke of like, if you had holes in your hands, you couldn't eat M&Ms either.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough.
So we will start this whole thing out for real, though, with I know you as you being the CEO at K2 among many other titles for a long time. And to me personally, I will say that you did whatever you could possibly do to get some time skiing. It seemed like anytime Silverton or CMH or anyone with a helicopter came in for a meeting, you would come in and hijack that first 5 minutes of the meeting, pretty much making sure you left with a seat on a chopper. Do you remember doing that?
I can't deny that. I can't deny that. Of course not.
Okay.
No, I'm a skier. I mean, you know that.
Yeah. And I think it was great because it was something that everybody at the company knew that our fearless leader liked to ski more than anybody else within the company. And I think I have one great story that kind of defines who you are as that leader. And we at one point had a global meeting in Seattle in the late 2000s, I believe it was. and we had distributors from all over the world in at K2. And it was a big sales meeting, but Crystal had like 2 feet of snow the night before. And while you were at the meetings on the first day of the meetings on a Wednesday, Thursday, you called in sick and were not there. Do you remember the time I'm talking about?
I'm going to have to deny that one.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Did I really do that?
Well, here's the beauty of it, Tim. I was the team manager, and I had a contract with Tyler Sicanti. And Tyler happened to be at Crystal that day. And he saw you in the parking lot, and he gave you a signed contract to give to me that day, and then texted me, hey, I just gave Tim the contract. When I was talking to someone who was in those meetings that day, they were all pissed because Tim was not in the meetings, and they're like, man, he called in sick, and there is no way he's sick. They got 2 feet at Crystal. And I was like, you know what's funny is I can prove that he wasn't sick. And nothing that would ever come back to you because, like I said, I think it was all cool that you were being the CEO of the company. We appreciated the fact that you love to do what the company was all about more than anyone else. And I think it's a pretty amazing. You're always trying to be in the mountains, but the funny part about you is you're not from the mountains. You're like a Jersey kid. Where did you grow up?
Oh, I grew up out near Rochester, New York, a little town called Leroy, which is kind of in between Rochester and Buffalo.
Well, was it New Jersey and then Minnesota and then Leroy?
Yeah, I was born in New Jersey. I was born in Paterson, New Jersey. And my dad, his family, they were miners up in northern Minnesota. And he wanted to move back to his hometown. So he packed the family up and we moved up to Virginia, Minnesota. And I guess that's about when I started skiing. But from Virginia, my mother wasn't putting up with that. She was a Jersey girl. And we moved back to New York State. And I grew up in little old Leroy, New York, the home of Jell-O. Anyway, it was kind of a little Western New York outpost, and I became a enthusiastic skier from quite humble mountain origins. I skied at Honey Hill in Warsaw, New York, which was a little T-bar slope that was less than an hour from my house in Leroy. And then from Honey Hill, I graduated to Swain Ski Center, which is about 600 vertical feet of skiing.
Uh-huh.
And then I raced for the Bristol Mountain ski team up at Bristol Mountain, New York, and just was always really excited about skiing. It was really my passion since I was a little guy. And I remember being in high school and, going to the requisite kind of career planning thing with a guidance counselor. And they said, what are you going to do for a living? How are you going to make a career, in your life? And I said, well, I'm going to be a skier. And I remember the person telling me, I know you love to ski, but you can't really make a living as a skier. I said, no, I'm going to make a living as a skier. And somehow I managed to accomplish that all those years ago. And yeah, it's been a great life. I've enjoyed it.
So it's all been calculated. Like you were bit by the bug really early. And like when you're picking college and you pick St. Michael's, is the reason you go, it's proximity to Stowe?
Absolutely. Yeah. No other reason. Turned out to be a pretty good academic institution as well. But yeah, proximity to Stowe was the only reason I picked there.
And I look at like the time that you went to high school and college. I mean, high school, I think is like 69 to 72. College is 73 to 77-ish. And just the way of the world at that point between the Grateful Dead, the Summer of Love, the Pill, it had to be just a really fun time with no worries whatsoever. I mean, was it a totally different world back then?
Yeah, of course, and pre-internet and pre-cell phones. And I remember packing my car up I had a little station wagon, and I remember driving up to Vermont because, I was an Easterner and my whole frame of reference was Eastern skiing. And I thought, if I could just find a way to get a job in Stowe, Vermont, I would have arrived. And I managed to do that after a couple of years. I spent 2 years at Bolton Valley, which is a small area close to Burlington, Vermont. And then from Bolton, they hired me over at Stowe after I had gotten certified at 18 years of age, and kind of the rest is history. But Stowe was an amazing place in the 70s for sure.
And that's where you meet Stu Campbell, right? And he's got a huge impact on your career. Like he was your first mentor.
Yeah, Stu Campbell and Cal Cantrell. Two of the real deans of Eastern and really national ski instruction. They were members of the PSIA Demo Team. And I was surrounded by some amazing talent in the Mount Mansfield Ski School that, we'd sit around with coffee stirs and show how skis went through turns, and you'd visualize, where your center of mass was, and all sorts of kind of arcane and to some people probably really useless exercises, but they really did form the foundation of my understanding of how skis are turned and how to teach people how to ski. So it was an amazingly productive time. And Stu Campbell was, one of my real lifelong mentors who helped me along in so many ways. He was just a great guy.
And you said he's part of the PSIA Demo Team, and that is a huge deal back in the 70s. Can you describe what that was like? Because I don't think anybody my age really understands the importance of that.
Yeah, the Demo Team, they started having these, kind of quadrennial events in the world of ski instruction called interskis, where the global ski teaching community would come together every 4 years to share their ideas on ski technique and how people best learned how to ski. And back in the 60s and the 70s, there was a lot of controversy about that. There was an Austrian technique, there was a French technique, there was an American technique. There were all different ways to look at skiing that were quite nationalistic. And every 4 years, you would go to the interski and share your ideas about ski teaching and ski technique. And I was able to participate in those interskis 3 times. It was my first trip to Japan back in 1977. And of course, had no idea about powder skiing and Japao and all that stuff that's happened subsequently. But yeah, it was a really interesting time. Campbell was one of the selectors for the interski, and I don't think he, by any stretch, gave me a free ride onto it, but I was probably as surprised as anyone at 21 or 22 years of age to have made the PSIA Demo Team. And yeah, it was just a fabulous experience.
I mean, that makes you a bona fide, I don't want to say rock star, but like a known entity in skiing where you're in the ski magazines. I think it kind of gives you the platform to write books later on. I mean, it's one of those things where you are like a pro athlete without the need to really perform. It's just kind of you're showing the technique.
I would say that was a big part of it. I mean, you had to be able to demonstrate the various turns and movements. I mean, way back when there was like final forms, like finished school figures that you had to perform to become a certified instructor. And I was one of the people who was, a model of that, I guess, where you would go down the hill and make a stem turn or a stem Christie or a parallel turn or a forward side slip or any one of a number of other maneuvers that were kind of the rites of passage for somebody who wanted to become a certified ski instructor. So I was a demonstrator. You have to understand exactly what you're trying to do, and you have to do it repeatedly over and over and over again, at certification exams to give the candidates an opportunity to know how they're supposed to do it. But I would say that those years on the demo team were really formative for me, more for the communication skills, because as a part of that job, I had to go to the various divisions within the Professional Ski Instructors of America, the East Coast, the Midwest, California, Northwest, wherever. I mean, they sent me all over the place throughout the winter in those years, probably 40 days a year, meeting different people, communicating what the Professional Ski Instructors of America, the American ski technique was about, the American teaching method, what that was about. And just being able to interact with lots of different people, I think was probably the most beneficial part of that portion of my career. Because I had to learn how to interact with all sorts of different people.
And from those years, you graduate to doing what a lot of other people do, and you move out west to where the skiing gets a little bit bigger. I think Bear Mountain is the place that you end up. I think you're running the ski school there, and you're coaching as well. Is this the first time you're really coaching?
Yeah, so the end of the Stowe years of the Mount Mansfield ski school years happened literally on Christmas Day in about 1977, I think. It was raining, pouring rain, and I had been out teaching a group of people from someplace in the southeast in the pouring rain. I came in soaked like a dog, and the ski school director, Peter Rush, said to me, "See you tomorrow, Tim." And I thought to myself, I don't know if you're going to see me tomorrow, because it was just such a miserable day, and it didn't seem there was much appreciation of my efforts that afternoon. And There was no snow on the horizon. It was just awful in Stowe. And I called up Jury Warren, who was the assistant director of the Snowbird ski school. And I said, Jury, have you got any work out there? Because we're just having an awful winter. Oh, we'd love to have you. So my wife and I were married at that time even. And we came out to Snowbird and spent the winter in Snowbird.
Oh.
And from Snowbird, I guess 77, 78. And then we moved to Bear Valley in California.
How long did you spend in Bear Valley?
3 years at Bear Valley. And that, you're exactly right. That's when I started, race coaching, because I'd been kind of on the peripheries of that. But we had a little organization and I kind of wore a lot of hats. I was the director of skiing and head race coach and doing technical training and all sorts of stuff. So that was Bear Valley. And then from Bear Valley, we went to Aspen, where I was the head coach of the Aspen Ski Club. And from there, did 1 year at Buttermilk. And then after Buttermilk Ski School, running that, I was the director of the Buttermilk Ski School. Then I went on to Powder Magazine. So it's kind of a circular route.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Aspen. So your one prodigy, Kyle Rasmussen, follows you from California because he loves your coaching so much. But Aspen's a whole nother world, and skiing's huge. And you're going to deal with a lot of different people than you're going to find at Stowe and other places. I mean, a lot of celebrities are coming through. Who's the most famous person you've ever taught to ski?
Well, I would say, I don't know if the most famous person I've ever taught to ski. I don't know, probably, this past winter at Jackson Hole, I had a girl who had 7.6 million Instagram followers, which I thought was pretty impressive. I took a picture of her in the morning, and at lunchtime, I gave her the picture. I airdropped her the picture. And by the end of lunch, she had like 80,000 likes on this photograph. So that's probably the most famous person currently I've taught skiing to.
Well, who was she?
Who was she?
Yeah.
She was a girl by the name of Sarah, I think Pampaio or something like that. Portuguese model. Just stunning. Not a wonderful skier. I had a picture of her, sitting on the snow after she crashed. It was just shocking to me. I mean, the way the world has changed. But where were we?
We were in Aspen. We were talking about the most famous people you've taught ski.
Well, I didn't know where you were going there with that comment. But I would tell you that the Aspen Ski Club job was probably one of the toughest jobs I've ever had in my life. Because, as you know, there are a lot of very, very successful people who have their children in the Aspen Ski Club, right now called, I guess, the Roaring Fork Winter Sports Club or something of that sort. But Aspen Ski Club back then was a small organization with about 70 kids, I guess we had in it. And they were the children of successful business people, former Olympic racers, And all of those people had an opinion on everything that you did for the athletes. So it was super challenging. And of course, you mentioned Kyle Rasmussen, Cowboy Kyle, that he had just an amazing run in Aspen. We brought him over there when he was a young kid from Bear Valley because we knew we had to get him exposed to, higher levels of competition. And he did amazingly well in the Rocky Mountain Trophy Series and was quickly picked up by the U.S. ski team and ended up winning the Lauberhorn, in Wengen. So he's quite a successful skier. But, we had lots of great skiers. Carter Payne was a part of our club, Monique Pelletier, lots of kids who really flourished at Aspen in those years. So they were good times.
And are you getting to know all the locals, and are you a big part of the community within Aspen? Because I feel like those might be the Hunter S. Thompson days, but I'm not 100%.
Hunter Thompson was still holding court in the Jerome back in those days. And I will not pretend that I was a friend or was saddling up on the bar next to him, but we certainly were aware of his activities down at Woody Creek. He was the legend that obviously, still is. The guy was a character. He was a wild man.
You're a wild man too, but it's a wild man when it comes to athletics and endurance sports. Like, well, I'm sure you enjoy a few beers here or there, some green. I know you're always an athlete, an endurance athlete. And in the summer, you like to ride your bike and you're super competitive. Were you racing your bike back then, actually entering races and winning?
I was. I've been riding the bike for lots of years, just as a skier, trying to stay in shape. And I got exposed to USCF bicycle racing in my years in Aspen. And was pretty successful. I worked my way through the category 4 and the category 3, and I was very close to being thrown out of the 3s because I was winning a little bit too much and they wanted me to go into the 2s, but I just didn't have the commitment to it to be able to train that hard to be successful in the 2s. But I was a successful Cat 3 racer and still maintain that passion for the bike even today.
Yeah, you know what I've always found funny about you is that you're really proud of your endurance to the point where when I met you in 2000, I remember hearing you have a conversation about taking some guys on a ride that were about 25 years younger than you, and you were just kicking their ass, and you just thought it was the funniest thing. Like, these guys think they're in such great shape, and I just smoked them. And you're still like that, I think, right?
Well, maybe I'm slowing down a little bit, but it is fun to be able to go out with younger people and be able to give them a good workout and give yourself a good workout. Certainly this past winter, I had plenty of chances to do that at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that it was the smartest thing I ever did, frankly, to go take the REI Byers and his assistant and then, go throttle him, on Vashon Island. It was not genius, really, from a sales standpoint, but it was fun. It was definitely fun. Yeah.
Now it's time for a sponsor break, and the 10 Barrel Brewery is such an amazing brand. They totally get all things ski, snowboard, bike, and dogs. Yep, man and women's best friend are not only loved by 10 Barrel, they're now going to be sponsored by the brand. That's right, 10 Barrel is putting together the first ever brewery team of sponsored dogs. And here is how to get your dog sponsored by 10 Barrel. First, post a video of your pup doing their best trick or their favorite sport on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Second, follow 10 Barrel Brewing Company and use hashtag GoodSitSquad, hashtag 10 Barrel, and hashtag contest in your post. Third, make sure your profile is public so they can see it. The 10 Barrel team of professional athletes, all the badass skiers and snowboarders that they sponsor, well, they are going to judge the pet competitors on their athleticism, style, and personality to find 4 of the best for the 21-22 season. Perks include a year's supply of Good Pup Sit Ale, $100 to spend at Roughwear, and $1,000 cash for the human. 10 Barrel's accepting submissions until May 24th, and the winners will be picked on May 26th. To see if your dog has what it takes, head on over to 10barrel.com/goodsit. My next sponsor is Rollerblade, and there are so many reasons to get into inline skating. It's so much easier on the body compared to running, and it's one of the best total body activities out there. It makes exercise fun, and for skiers, it's the only thing that creates the same muscle movements and carving motions that happen on your skis. Rollerblade has crafted a ski-to-skate program over the years, and it's proven to keep you fit and get you ready for ski season. To find out more about Rollerblade and skate to ski, download the Rollerblade app or head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor this round is one of my favorites, Stanley. And we may as well start their ad with the most important part. I'm going to save you 30% on all Stanley products. This is an amazing deal that can be unlocked with the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word and lowercase. And you use it when you check out at stanley1913.com. And if you spend over $200 with that code DRINKFAST, Stanley will also ship you a Powell Movement beanie with your order. It's a limited edition beanie, and Stanley's an amazing brand that I hope you know about. They're the ones that invented the category of keeping things hot and cold back in 1913. Think about that green bottle that used to keep your grandpa's coffee hot. That's the Stanley I'm talking about. They make all the things that you're going to need for your parking lot lunch sessions at the ski hill and your summer camping and RVing adventures. So head on over to stanley1913.com for that deal. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So you do your time in Aspen, you do some time in Buttermilk, and then eventually, like you said, you end up at the associate publisher at Powder Magazine. And back then, Powder Magazine and other ski magazines, they were ski media. They meant everything in the world of skiing. What did Powder mean to the world of skiing at that point? Where did they stack up against the Skiings, and all the other magazines out there?
Well, Powder, I think, really from the beginning was after a different niche in the world of winter sports and skiing specifically, that we were after the people who were into the quote other experience, the simple act of trying to search out powder snow and, that feeling of freedom and flight that you have when you're on a great day in the mountains. And at that time, the skiing and snow country were, very straight, traditional publications that were more about travel and what the meals were like at a given resort than they were about, where the best powder stashes were and where the best skiers were skiing.
Yep.
And my job when I went there was to try and help position the publication with both the vertical, the endemic advertisers that were so strong for all the media at that point in time, as well as the non-endemic. So I dragged the bag to New York City and went to all the major advertising agencies and tried to get cars and beverages and, lifestyle stuff into powder on the pretense that, we spoke to people who were at the pyramid of influence, at the peak of the pyramid of influence. So we believe that our readers at Powder were the people who influence other people downstream, because they were the person who came back on Monday morning to the office with the goggle tan and the raccoon eyes, from having been out in the mountains all weekend. So they were kind of the experts. And our contention was that if you talk to these experts, you will accrue additional benefits beyond the relatively small circulation that we had as a title at that point. So those were great years. I mean, the difficulty with Powder Magazine was that, we were based in Southern California. And again, as you know, I mean, I'm a skier, and to live in Southern California and have to drive 8 hours to Mammoth Mountain, a substantial ski hill, was just not something that I loved.
I would think that, combined with the fact that this is your first job where it's like work. Like you're getting on planes to go to sell shit instead of getting on planes to go ski shit, which is not what Tim Petrick's supposed to be doing at that point.
Right.
So I would think that it's like this job creates an amazing opportunity for you to grow your Rolodex, for you to meet every single person in skiing because everybody knows what's going on with powder.
Right.
Is that kind of where you get connections throughout the industry, where like Olin comes a-calling and is like, hey, we want to have you come work with us?
Absolutely. It was an opportunity to really audit the entire ski industry, because if you're going to try to sell advertising to somebody, you need to understand their marketing plans. And I was able to go to all of the vertical advertisers, the Rossinols, the Solomons, the K2s, et cetera, of the world, and talk with them about their marketing plans and how powder could interface with it and improve those marketing plans. So the way I ended up leaving from powder was being up here in Washington and going to Vashon Island and talking to George Montgomery, who was the VP of marketing for K2 at the time. And I was telling him, well, now that you've got K2 and you've got Pre and you've got, the recently acquired Olin skis, you can combine these pages together. We'll get you a lower page rate. We'll get you more frequency and let you talk to our readers even more than you have been, George. And I went through my whole shtick with how this was going to benefit K2 and the other brands associated under the K2 umbrella at the time. And George politely listened. And when I was done and literally walking out of his door after this pitch, he said, would you think about coming and helping us turn around Olin skis? And I thought to myself, no, thanks. But, it seemed like it was going to be some very heavy lifting. The reason why K2 got Olin at that point in time was because it was really dead as a brand. The sell-through was terrible. Dealer satisfaction was dissatisfaction was incredibly high. And it just seemed like there was no way. But I got back down to Southern California, back into the traffic, back into the not being by the mountains.
Yep.
And I thought to myself, wait a minute, if Olin is that bad, if I manage to turn it around, everybody will think that was pretty impressive and that was a good job. Maybe that guy's got something going on. And if I don't turn it around, everybody will say it was so screwed up, nobody could have fixed it. So I called George back and I said, if you were serious about that, I'd like to talk about the position with Olin. And he said, when can you get up here? And I flew up there, the next week, interviewed with George and with Jim Garrison, who was the president of K2 at the time. And they came back pretty promptly with an offer for me to become the VP of marketing and sales for Olin skis. The only condition was I have to move to Centerbrook or someplace close to Centerbrook, Connecticut, where Olin was based. Their sales and marketing office was based. So I did that. And Michelle was on board with me, and we traveled across the country. We lived in Old Lyme, Connecticut. And in the course of about a year, Olin had gone from basically 100% negative ratings to 100% positive ratings with the retail community. I mean, we were on a wonderful little growth curve, and it was going great.
What do you do? Was things in place before you got there that kind of set that in motion, or do you come in and tinker with some things to make some changes?
I tinkered with some things to make some changes. It was kind of like the old blocking and tackling 101 business stuff. You got to deliver the product on time. It's got to be priced right. You got to stand behind it from a warranty standpoint. You got to have an understandable model line. You got to have good graphics.
So they just weren't doing the basics at all.
They were just not doing the basics at all. And fortunately, I had access to K2's engineers. Initially, Jimmy Vandergrift worked with me on the first ski that we developed, which was called the RTS, the Rapid Turn Slalom. And then after the Olin RTS took off, then they assigned a young engineer by the name of Anthony Duracco.
Huh.
And Anthony and I worked on the Olin project for a couple of years and brought to market some pretty interesting skis, like the Demo Team slalom. So I went back to my old roots of the PSIA and the Demo Team, and we used them to promote this ski, which was a easy turning recreational ski. And things were quite good. And Duracco and I had a lot of fun with that brand. And then basically K2 was kind of in one of its little kind of downturns that big brands go up and down. And they basically said to me, you got to come out to Washington and help us with K2. So it was not really something that I had planned per se. And I really resisted it because by then I had moved the marketing and sales office up to Stowe, Vermont. So I was running kind of a satellite operation out in Stowe, Vermont. So I kind of came back to my Stowe roots.
So you're living the dream at this point.
Living the dream. You know, Olin was a nice, tidy little brand.
And you're young, making good money at this point too, I would think, running a big brand and skiing.
Well, you know, I mean, you've worked at K2, Mike. You've never made good money at K2, but K2 is never one of the great paying companies. But my problem probably in my entire life is that I probably would have done it all for free if I could have figured out a way to do it because I just love what I was doing. Yeah. So anyway, they put the gun to my head and they said, you got to come out to Washington. And after some polite discussion and some not so polite discussion, I accepted the position to come out and be the GM of K2 Skis at the time. So that would have been 93, I guess.
And this is a time where K2 was a company, I mean, they're known for skis, but they started making snowboards in 87.
Right.
And when you get to Vashon, there's a full-on production run there. I mean, back then,
Right.
Everything was made on the floor in the U.S. And what was the vibe like on Vashon? Was it pretty loose? Like at 5 o'clock, was everybody heading to the bar and having beers? And was it one big community of K2 employees?
I wouldn't say it was loose. I mean, I think that K2 at that time, it had a very clear vision of itself that, you know, there wasn't so much stuff on the plate. I mean, this was prior to all the different, quote, tuck-in acquisitions that K2 Incorporated, or I guess initially Anthony Industries, and then K2 Incorporated imposed on us as an organization. So we were focused, like you say. I mean, we had snowboards, we had skis, and that was basically it.
Yep.
So it was a very focused operation at that point in time, you know, early 90s. Then as these tuck-in acquisitions occurred and suddenly you've got Dana Designs and you've got Ride Snowboards, which turned out to be a great success, but was initially probably quite disruptive. You know, it was a focused, tight little organization. And yeah, people would go out after work and maybe have a beer or something. What was the name of the bar down in town? At the corner?
I can't even think of it anymore, unfortunately.
Right? You know the bar I'm talking about.
Bishop's?
Bishop's.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, people would go to Bishop's and people would compare notes at the end of the day. But It was very, very much a family back then. It was kind of us against the world with K2.
There's a different sense of pride, I feel like. I mean, I was only in that building when they built U.S. product for like a few weeks, but
Right.
Could you feel the sense of pride of building the product in the U.S. and then seeing it compete in races on a national stage and everybody just like, that's our shit that we made right here? Was there that pride that you could sense in the facility?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it went from from the person who was sweeping the floor out in the plant to the engineering team to the customer service, whatever. I mean, everybody was a part of this movement, if you will, that was K2 playing the game that really was the European game, making skis. And we were doing it right there. And I think in fairness, I don't think that stopped when we stopped making skis on Vashon, but it became more challenging.
Yeah, but there was always that comment that someone had to say where it's like, oh, your skis are made in China, or they could say it. And there was nothing that you could say or think back. You're like, yeah, you're right. The guys who are making our skis right now don't know what skiing is. At least I thought that sometimes. I'd never say that out loud, but It was different when you could see like the dude that you work with every day is actually the guy building the ski that someone's racing on or that someone's skiing in the park on at a high level. And that was how it was at one point, which was a different feeling, I feel like, than at the end, given we were all proud to be part of K2 and the Americana and the history that the brand has.
Right. But I mean, I went out on the apology tour, with the retail community domestically and internationally when we started making the skis in China. And after about the, second or third retailer told me, I don't care where you make the skis. I just want them to be of good quality, delivered on time, priced right, selling through at the cash register. I stopped apologizing for it. And we frankly made much better skis in China than we made in the United States because labor was substantially less expensive in China. And as you well know, I mean, skis are essentially handmade.
Yep.
I mean, there's not a lot of automation in skis, and there's a couple of hours of labor in every pair of skis, in the aggregate. And on Vashon Highland, the way we improved our margins was to try and reduce those labor hours. Once we moved to China, if there was a problem, we'd stick somebody on the line there with a piece of Fibertex and erase the problem, as it were, right? So it was a little bit different world to be able to just throw labor at stuff that you couldn't do in the United States with the cost differential. So who knows? Was it the right decision? I think that what K2 is doing right now is interesting, but I think it's quite challenging to have certain skis made in the United States and then have, the bulk of your collection still made in China. I don't quite understand what is going on right now, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
You know what? People are going to buy both of them, and it doesn't matter. It's K2. They're definitely going to make some great products. But I think a challenge for you, and given I'm getting ahead of the story, and I'll bring it back in a second, but since we're talking about shifting production, when you come back to K2 your second time around, I feel like that's one of the first things that happens is like you get back into the fold and production shifts. And how tough is that for you as an executive at that point to tell people that that you've known for 20 years that, hey, your job's never going to be back again?
Oh, yeah, it was horrible. Yeah, I can't tell you that's anything less than horrible. I mean, there were a lot of wonderful people that were a part of that K2 family that didn't have jobs after the move happened.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there were some of the key people who are still at K2 right now who managed to survive those kind of huge cuts. But yeah, I mean, it's never fun letting go of people. And, K2, we had more of that than we'd like to remember. I'm sure that with all the various attempts to try and make numbers for the parent companies, we had more than our share of that.
Yeah, and that's just got to be one of those things for you as a position on top where everybody's kind of looking at you as like, hey, he is part of this. It's got to be tough to go to sleep at night when you realize that you're really just a ski bum at heart who's kind of shot to the top of the industry, and now you're being like challenged to let hundreds of people go at one time. And trying to sleep through that, I would think, would be pretty tough.
Yeah, fair enough. No question. Like I say, it's never fun, having reductions in force, as they euphemistically say it.
Yeah.
But I think people, for the most part, understood that I was working for the owners. I mean, when ownership tells you that you're going to have to make some adjustment in your expense budgets, you can either decide to do that or you can decide to leave. And since I was never independently wealthy, I needed a job.
Yeah.
And I had to do stuff that I wasn't terribly pleasant, but that's not really out of the ordinary for any senior executive.
It's time for another sponsor break, and first up is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. If you don't know Peter Glenn, well, they started in Vermont over 60 years ago when retail was king, meaning they know people and they know service, and they have always supported some of the coolest stuff in snow. Right now, they sponsor Johnny Mosley, this podcast, and a whole bunch more. To support them back, please check out their website, peterglenn.com, when you're shopping. They have all the brands, the lowest prices, and amazing deals. And guess what? They will price match the big internet guys, offer free shipping on orders of $49 and over, and have a truly no-hassle return policy. To find out more about the deals, the sales, and everything going on at Peter Glenn, head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor is Alonskis, and they have been building a cult following in the States for a few years now. Why? Because their skis are better than everyone else's. And believe me, I worked at a ski manufacturer for 16 years. I know what a quality product looks like when it comes out of the factory, and you aren't going to get any better quality than you're going to find with your Alonskis. And that's just the craftsmanship. They ski even better. They're rock solid underfoot at the highest of speeds, yet still lightweight, and there's no chatter at all. And in just a few months, I can feel my skiing getting better. And that's no joke. You will feel the same thing. To find out more about all things Alon, head on over to alonskis.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Well, let's talk about some fun stuff with K2, and there's so much that we could talk about, but I think when people look back on what Tim Petrick did for the K2 brand, and you think about the most impactful things that you've done, one of them I feel like is the Grateful Dead line of product that's going to be talked about for 50 years from now, for 100 years from now. You're going to be able to find these things on eBay. And I believe that you're the one who spearheaded this whole Grateful Dead project as you're a big fan of the band. How does this whole thing come to be?
Well, it started actually with Alonskis, and I was trying to make a shop employee t-shirt. That would be kind of a giveaway t-shirt when the reps went out and did clinics. And I had a sticker that I had picked up at a show of the little dancing bears, and I sent that decal off to the t-shirt company, and they called me back and they said, "Do you have rights to use this?" I said, "No, I don't have any rights to do it." He said, "Well, the Dead are super heavy on their logos and stuff. You can't just, use that." I said, "Well, I'm just going to give away 300 t-shirts. What's the difference?" And he said, no, we can't do it. We don't want to get in trouble. So I said, "Fine. How would you get permission?" The guy said, "Well, I'd fax a letter to Grateful Dead Merchandising in San Rafael, California, and see if they would allow you to do it." Well, I kind of dutifully sent the fax, asking for rights to use these dancing bears, and they didn't get back to me on the timeline that I needed to make these shirts. So I made the shirts without the dancing bears on the sleeve. But then I got this phone call out of the blue where the guy said, "Hey, my name is Kid Candelario, and this is the guy who actually took care of Phil Lesh's bass, who was also in charge of their merchandising." And he said, "A lot of us are skiers. We'd love to do something with you." And I was going, who is this on the phone? What are you talking about? Somebody's pimping me, right? I'm getting punked here or something, So he said, no, for real. He says, we're playing down in Madison Square Garden, and I was in Stowe, Vermont at the time. And he said, "Could you get down to the Garden? We'll have backstage passes for you and we can meet and talk about this." So it's like, okay, I'll try that. Yeah. So I drive down to New York City and find my way to the Garden in the afternoon and sat down with Kid Candelario, who's still a friend to this day, and, worked out the details of a licensing agreement. It was like unbelievable to me. Honestly, because I've been a fan of the band since the early 70s, and I couldn't actually believe that here I am standing on the stage, with these guys. And we managed to put together 5 or 6 different skis and a couple of snowboards. And, besides, just the kind of the blind luck of actually having these guys contact me about doing a licensing deal was that we did numbered pairs. And I think that that was, a cool part of this. I was trying to create an element of collectability to these items, so it was like 001/250. We made 250 pairs of this model or 500 pairs of that model. So they're all numbered that we did. And I think that gave it a certain cachet.
Yeah, it was just a huge thing that people still talk about today. And if you look at the Grateful Dead and their merchandising, they have hoarded themselves out to every product category out there in the past 2 years. You could be the first licensing item of the Grateful Dead.
We were certainly one of the biggest revenue producers for them initially, because you got to sell a lot of T-shirts to equal one pair of skis.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So, we were held in high regard by the Dead at that point. I would get a laminate pass. They would do 2 or 3 tours a year, and I would get the itinerary that the band would be on, along with my 2 laminate passes 3 times a year for like 5 years.
That's amazing.
It was insane. It was completely insane. And if a friend needed to have tickets for a show, it was like, how many you need? I sent Bill Quigley and the gang from D&Q down there in Cherry Hills, New Jersey. I sent those guys to the Spectrum in Philadelphia. I think they did 3 or 5 day run there, and they had tickets every night. And backstage every night. And I remember getting there. My dear friend Bill Quigley, I remember, I think I got there after the 3rd or 4th night of the run in Philly. And by the 4th night, he was just on fire. He had seen 3 nights of the Grateful Dead, and he was just braying. He was just, just insane.
Yeah.
It was so funny. And I took Bob and Carol Olson to a show at the Rosemont Auditorium in Chicago. Sat on the stage. They had the headsets on. They're listening to the band's, mix in their headphones. Just blew their mind. It was just so cool to be able to do that with retailers. And for myself, of course, as a fan, it was fabulous.
That sounds like an exciting time. Another really exciting time for the K2 brand is the mid-90s. At this point, you've got K2 snowboarding, which is firing and doing really well. You've got K2 inline skates, who's coming from nowhere to 100 miles an hour and taking the world by storm because it's the biggest trend in the country. And K2's at the forefront of that with Rollerblade as well. And it's like, at that point, snowboarding is like a $100 million business. Inline skating is probably twice that. And skiing's the one that's hurting at that point. It's like a $40-50 million business. And I would think by 96, Alon has put out the SCX at this time. You said the SCX would have the biggest impact on skiing since Howard had introduced metal to skis. And skiing needed it because snowboarding was eating its lunch. Inline skating was coming over and going to take a lot of the thunder at K2. And is this when the plans for the 2, 3, and 4 come into place by about 96? And are you behind all of that?
Well, yes. And I guess how it evolved was that, Bard Glenn was one of our engineers who was really on it and watched trends. And I think probably doesn't get enough credit for the success of K2 back in the 90s and late 2000s. But he had a pair of Alon SCXs, as you mentioned. He also had a Head Cyber, and he had a Kneissl Ergo.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All 3 of those models were kind of like training wheel skis at the time. People were thinking about these things as, well, they're for recreational skiers. They're going to help you learn how to carve, but an expert skier wouldn't really ski on them. And I had the opportunity to ski on those skis along with the rest of our core testing team because Bart got them in front of us. And I said, we should make a sub 200 centimeter ski targeted at expert skiers with a deeper side cut based on the experience of skiing on those 3 models of skis. And that was the K24. And, the design length of the K24 was 198 centimeters, not by chance. We wanted to make something under 200 because remember, in the context of the time, real skiers skied on 204s, 205s, 27s, but they didn't ski on 198s. Right. So we went 198. So we were under 200 and we created the K24. And somehow by sometimes blind luck, Georgie Torme, who was our Eastern race guy at the time, got a pair of those K24s and put them on the feet of Bodie Miller. And Bodie Miller dominated the U.S. Nationals at Sugarloaf on those skis.
On a pair of stock skis.
On a pair of stock skis, actually not even stock A grades. I think they were out of the hard to pair bin.
Okay.
We were still making skis on Vachon. And Bodie loved the skis. And like I say, dominated, I think it was the Nationals. And I remember going to the Las Vegas ski show, and Andy Lunn was our marketing director at the time. Andy Lunn photocopied a little flyer that said, Bodie Miller wins GS at Sugarloaf, Maine. I think it was Sugarloaf, Maine, U.S. Nationals. And that was a bigger story than the World Championships and all the athletes that Rossignol. I remember being pretty happy that Rossignol has all these famous World Cup racers over in their booth. And we've got a flyer about Bodie Miller, and we are the talk of the Las Vegas ski show at the time, which was just crazy because Rossignol had millions of dollars invested in this World Championships where they did exceptionally well. But the story was, how in the hell did Bodie do this on a pair of 198 K24s?
Well, everybody thought those parabolic skis were for beginners and that nobody on Bodie's level should be racing on them. And then Bodie beats everybody by like a second, which is unheard of.
Right.
And everybody's like, holy shit, this thing's for real. And K2's doing it a little bit differently than the SCX or the Cyber because it's not the full parabola that it's cut on, which doesn't hold you in the turn as long. And everything's said and done. K2 was on the map. They're on fire. Everybody's on a 2, 3, or 4. Everything's going great. You go into the trade show into 97, and everybody loves K2. You're selling a shit ton of product. Everything's going great. And the whole time you know you're leaving K2 and going to Booth Creek. Why would you leave K2 when they're just killing it?
Well, I don't know. I had a lot of smoke blown up my ass by the owner of Booth Creek at the time. And, you know, I just thought it was going to be an opportunity that I couldn't miss. And in fairness to George Gillette, who blew the smoke in my ass, what George's vision was precisely what has happened with the Icon Pass. George had this idea that if you created a network of resorts that were proximate to metropolitan areas with a high percentage of skiers, and specifically we had resorts by San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, Boston, that we could take these entry points and drive these skiers through some kind of a frequent skier program to a destination property. And this, I thought, was a genius idea. Unfortunately, we ran out of money before we could actually execute the idea.
Right.
But it was brilliant because, you know, ski areas, destination ski areas, I should say, are high fixed, low variable cost operations. If you have 100,000 people skiing at a destination property, if you put another 20,000 people there, it doesn't cost you another cent really to put 20 more thousand butts and seats right on these chairlifts. So the money that you could get, if you could get incremental volume into a destination property, it is enormously profitable.
Did he ever talk about the ski experience for the people though? Because I think that's the problem now. That, yeah, they can put 20,000 more people there, but the experience is ruined for the skier that was there before the 20,000 people. Was that ever brought up in the conversation, or was it more, hey, we can just generate more revenue?
Frankly, I never thought that far through the proposal. I just thought, well, that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
And he already had the satellite operations were set up. He just didn't have a destination property. The only thing he had was Targhee, which is not really a substantial enough resort close enough to a major airport to be able to fulfill that plan.
Right.
So he was trying to buy another destination property, and we looked at Telluride, we looked at all sorts of different resorts around the country, and he just ran out of money. Couldn't do it. And, you know, I left shortly thereafter there, and I'm back to K2 again. But yeah, I mean, it was a brilliant idea. So anyhow, that's how I ended up leaving K2 in the midst of this wild success of the K24. It was like, God, I got to do this. This is just genius. But didn't happen.
You get to ski a bunch, I'm sure, which is great.
Right. That was good.
But you come back to K2, and from what I remember, I won't say you were jockeying, but it seemed like you were positioning yourself to be the CEO of the company at some point. It was the next logical progression, it seemed like, from all of us in-house, that Tim was going to be the leader of the company, because you pretty much were anyway. But then all of a sudden, K2 brings a guy in from Canada that had been like a really cool guy at K2 Canada. They bring in Robert Markovich to become president of K2. Was that a total shock to you?
I would say, yeah, I was surprised.
I mean, were you blindsided? Because we were all blindsided. We didn't know they were going to bring in Markovich.
Yeah, no, I was pretty surprised. And, you know, I mean, things happen.
And Robert was really cool when he was in Canada and he had a regular position. But when he became CEO, I'll say he became like the new money type of asshole combined with a dude that had like a bunch of Trump-like qualities. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. But he got shit done. I mean, he definitely got shit done. Everyone in the company hated him. What was your personal relationship with him? Did you guys get along or did you just tolerate him because he was the boss?
You know, I mean, I think that my relationship with Robert in those years was quite good. You know, I mean, I kind of sucked it up. I mean, of course, I would have loved to have been named the CEO of the place when Markovich was. But, you know, I sucked it up and said, let's see what happens. And I supported him fully in those years and tried to work with him and tried to execute the plan that he had laid out there.
You were a good soldier.
I was a good soldier. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was a good soldier. You know, some of the progress that Robert made in those years was pretty phenomenal.
Dude, the guy got shit done. Given
He
you
did.
love him or hate him, he got his
Yeah.
job done and the people above him were happy with the results that he provided. So while I wasn't a fan of his management style, and I did personally like him before he became CEO, so it's amazing how he changes as a person so much. And I've seen him after he's been CEO and he seems super cool again. So it's weird how he turned into an asshole for like a decade, but whatever. That's just what happens, I guess, when you get to that
Right.
level.
Right.
But at this time, to me, the really crazy thing was that somehow the guys who owned Jarden, which is the company that owned K2, they somehow went through some back door and purchased Rossignol. And if you went and looked through all the paperwork and stuff, these Jarden guys' names are on the Rossignol company, but no one knows about it. So it kind of seems shady to me. It's like, hey, how are the K2 guys buying Rossignol and the competition? But that happens, and eventually you're named president of Rossignol North America. I mean, how does that all happen? Is that all behind closed doors, weird, shady stuff? Are you allowed to talk about it? What happens there?
Well, I mean, I think most of it's really a matter of public record, so I'm not reluctant to talk about it. I mean, basically, Jarden was a minority non-voting interest in the acquisition of Rossignol from Quicksilver. So Quicksilver had to sell Rossignol because it was bankrupting that company, all right? Because they had some crazy vision of making Rossignol a lifestyle brand and really changing the nature, like you would have Rossignol surf shorts, because that was their frame of reference. It was just kind of wacky, and they didn't focus on the product very hard. And, you know, they kind of were riding their legacy, I guess, a little bit. So when the brand came up for sale, when it was on the block from Quicksilver, Jarden would have liked to have purchased it directly, but it didn't think it was going to be able to because of antitrust concerns.
Sure.
So Macquarie Capital, which is an Australian bank, came in with Jarden to purchase it. And as I said, Jarden was a minority non-voting interest. And the people at Jarden introduced me to the Macquarie people, and I interviewed with them. And I went over there and was a part of the turnaround team.
And you guys turned that company around significantly. When I look at what happened over at Rossignol in the years that you were there, it was like the K24 all over again, but with the Rossignol S7. Did it feel like that momentum all over again at Rossi? Like you could just feel it going from the toilet to the penthouse?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment. I mean, you know, Rossignol had that S7 in the hopper, so I can't claim that I was really instrumental in that ski at all. It was already in play. But I think what I did do with Rossignol was to suggest that they needed to do a better job of benchmarking against other brands. Because if you only compare yourself to yourself as a ski designer, as a person trying to develop good skis, you might make the best Olin ski possible. Like this was really what happened with Olin. Olin would test only against Olin skis.
Right.
Well, you made the best Olin ski possible, but it's not as good as XYZ brand. And that was exactly what Rossi was doing. And Rossi got into a much more strict and disciplined benchmarking program. So they understood what were the best skiers in a given category, whether it be all mountain or powder or race or whatever. And they tested more thoroughly against what was out there and made better skis. I mean, at the end of the day, Rossignol did some kind of crazy gimmicky stuff with Quicksilver because that was kind of their orientation. They just weren't really focused on making good basic skis by category. And I helped them get there on that. But I got to tell you, going there after having spent the bulk of my career trying to destroy that company, it was a weird point in time for me. Super weird.
Oh, I can imagine. And what happens while you're gone, too, is you leave and go to Rossi, and Rossi's crushing it. But at the same time, Markovich eventually takes the job at Coleman, so he's no longer the CEO. Your good buddy, Anthony DiRocco, who's an engineer by trade, ends up being the CEO at K2. And K2 seems to me like it's all coming back together again. We kind of have that feeling that it had when I got there. And Anthony's the CEO. K2 brings you back into the fold, and you end up being named the CEO to K2, which is, I think, the position that you've probably always wanted in your life once you started with K2. Does that fuck things up with your relationship with Anthony? Does he totally blindsided when you come back to K2? It's like a drama, a soap opera here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a little bit it messed up my relationship with Anthony, sadly, because,
because you guys are bros, man. You guys are good friends for a long time.
We were really, really good friends for a long time. And, I was just, like all of us, I guess, who work for major corporations. I was a pawn,
Yeah.
I was a pawn that was getting pushed around the chessboard. And unfortunately, some other pieces, are going to fall when you're pushed around the chessboard like that. So of all the things in my career that I regret was probably coming back, frankly, to K2 after being at Rossignol. That really complicated everything.
Well, you came back to so many headaches and so many nightmares. It's like we were bringing in a new brand every other week, it seemed like. And they wanted everything to be 20% bigger next year, but they wanted to cut budgets by 10% and headcount by 10%. There was no way for you to win in that point. And the way things kept going with K2, I'm sure your life was just stressful going to these shareholder meetings and going and meeting the heads of Jarden and just wanting to pull your hair out and not being happy anymore. Does it get to a point where you hate your job?
Well, I don't know if I hated my job, but I got to the point where I was going to sleep angry every night and I was waking up angry every morning. And that is a difficult experience, where you have just no satisfaction in your life and you're just frustrated every day. So yeah, that wasn't the best of times. But, the good news, I think, is that it all worked out and I moved on and had a wonderful 3 years at Silverton Mountain. And I've had a fabulous 3 years now at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. So, it all kind of worked out, but it was ugly.
Yeah, you look at it on paper, you've had dream job after dream job after dream job. It just seems like at those few years at the end of K2, there was a bunch of headaches. But that's corporate America, and you hear people complain about corporate America and how it's evil, and eventually they bring back Robert Markovich. Do they give you any notice again, or is it just like, see you, Tim?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. I was a little surprised, for sure.
And see, I was gone. I had left like 2 months before that because I could already see that everything was going wrong within those walls at K2, and I wanted out. I had been there 16 years, and I thought I would be a lifer there. And I quit.
Yeah.
Then 2 months later, like you're on the way out, the company's moving downtown from its cool Soto building and everything's changing. And the good thing for you is you don't have to wake up angry anymore and go to bed angry anymore. You have that time at Silverton. You have the time at Thompson Bike Tours at Jackson Hole. And it's like you've lived dream jobs in there. There's been a ton of injuries and there's a heart attack that we're not going to talk about because you know what? You're the healthiest person and most fit person I know. And it was a shock to read that you had a heart attack, but you're better now. And has that impacted your life at all now, or are you back to regular Tim?
The heart attack was for sure a big turning point in my life because I'd already kind of gone back to what I was passionate about, which was being on the snow and being associated with being in the mountains. And to have this heart attack occur was obviously a big surprise because I've been in great physical condition my entire life, but a piece of plaque broke off and jammed into my left anterior descending artery, and I'm super lucky to be alive. And I think after you go through an experience like that, then every day and every moment that you are blessed to be on this earth is probably a little more important. And you take it a little more seriously. And after it happened at Silverton, clearly living at 9,300 feet above sea level and going to work every day between 10,400 and 13,300 feet above sea level is probably not the best idea in the world.
Right.
So to move to Jackson at a relatively lower elevation, I mean, not like Jackson is low because it's 6,300 at the base and 10,400 at the top, but the top is where Silverton starts. Right. So, I mean, it's not comparable. So, I mean, when I'm hiking in the backcountry at Jackson, I mean, it's reasonable. But I think if I were to take this heart as it is, which is not a diseased heart, I got a stent in there in that one artery, but I mean, it's not like I have a diseased heart, but nonetheless, I mean, I got to be a little bit careful.
Yeah, be smart about it.
You got to be smart about it. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was scary, but I'm glad that all worked out. And I'm sure you're glad that all worked out. But at this point in the podcast, I have something that I like to call inappropriate questions.
Okay. You've asked plenty of those already, Mike, but okay.
I have. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that I feel like the audience wants to hear. But these inappropriate questions are from a guest, and they can ask anything to you. And usually I record the guests, and then I play them for you, and it's a total surprise. But go figure, no one wanted to go on record for you. I thought I had David Courier, but he went silent on me, and he didn't record. That's okay. I did get some questions from people that were very close to you. I'm not at liberty to say who they are, and they're not that inappropriate, but I think they are kind of funny. And I'll ask the first one to you. How many times have you been caught changing in your office?
Oh, boy. Probably more than I'd like to share. I mean, it's kind of a function of being a bicycle commuter that you're going to end up being indisposed as you get back on your bike. So, yeah, that's happened for sure.
And if you're talking about bicycle commuting, then you're talking about putting on spandex. You're most likely not wearing underwear underneath them. So when you've been caught changing in your office, you've been caught changing like in the buck, huh?
Probably, unfortunately. Embarrassingly, yes.
All right. So that's question number one. We'll jump into question number two. What is the most random thing you've ever requested of a company intern? I can give you a hint.
What you're thinking of?
Yeah. Was there an intern that you once used as your sag wagon?
In Europe.
Was it in Europe?
Yes, it was in Europe. No, absolutely. I had forgotten about that. But yeah, Marcus Voss and I did a little thing called the Tour Transalp, where you start in Germany, you ride your bike over the course of a week down to Italy. So it's a stage race, a multi-day stage race. And we asked the intern there if he would drive a car for us in between stops. So we had some way to get to hotels and things like that. So yeah, I had forgotten about that.
All right. Well, I will jump into your final inappropriate question, and I hope it's going to be your best story of the podcast because I think I've heard this one a little bit. But what is your experience with Japanese toilets, and have you ever had an awkward experience?
Well, yes, I was. It's probably too much information, but yeah, I was in a, kind of the standard Tokyo, Shinjuku, very warm summer office after lunch, after flying over there the day before. Anthony Duraco was certainly a part of this story, but we were sitting there and going through model lines, and we had just had lunch, and something in the seasoning just did not agree with me, and I had to excuse myself, and I ran to the restroom, and I find the classic Japanese rectangular hole in the floor, which you are supposed to balance yourself over as you empty your bowels. And I, unfortunately, went all over the pants, the legs of my pants. And now I am in the bathroom afterwards, rinsing my suit out that has got poop all over it, and come back into the room. Rocco looked up and just saw me soaking wet from the waist down. And yeah, that was the one. That was a pretty ugly incident. That is for sure.
That is amazing. All you can do is look back and laugh on that now.
Absolutely.
Well, Tim, I want to thank you for your time on this Easter Sunday. I felt privileged to have you as my CEO at 2 different times. I think you're only CEO once, but it's felt like 2 different times. And it was funny how you did things. I remember in the skate days when budgets were being slashed, I remember you came to my office one day and you're like, Mike, you need to make that $200,000 athlete budget $30,000. And while I was really pissed that I had to do that, I never held it against you or even thought anything bad about Tim. I was just like, fuck, I've got to change this budget, and that's just how life works. And I did, and we had a lot of unhappy inline skaters, and it was all because of you, Tim. And you know what? I still would do it all over again because you're a pleasure to work with, and I thank you for your time.
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Thanks for asking me to be here.
So that was time with Tim Petrick, an industry lifer, and the path he has taken is pretty interesting. Most people start low on the totem pole in the world of skiing. Tim started as an instructor, but it seemed like every turn he made in his career, a bigger opportunity was in front of him. And once he got out of the lower level jobs in skiing, his work became more of a desk job, meetings and showing return on investment. And while that's cool, I don't think that's what Tim ever intended for his career. He was born to be on the snow. And now that Tim is in the back 9 of his career, while we don't talk about it much, it sounds like between his Silverton days, his time with Thompson Bike Tours, and instructing at Jackson Hole, he's kind of back to that ski bum life that most of us don't get to live unless you do 2 years after college type of thing, which I did. But Tim has done that his whole life on different levels. And while he's back to the basics now, you can bet that Tim has skied all over the world in the name of work. And I'm guessing that if an 18-year-old Tim could see where an older Tim is now, he would proudly approve. At this point, it's time for the review of the week. And I messed up last week. The person who did give me that 1-star review, well, they did give me a rating as well, so I want to thank them for that. So here is the review of the week. It's a 1-star review from I Hit Lift Towers Daily. It's titled, Keep Out of Politics. Here is the review. You need to work on being more biased towards different parties. That's it. Now, I try to stay away from politics, and I never preach about them. My beliefs do come out, but it's not like I ever say anything about a party or politics that much. I just think that the virus is real, the country is fucked, people aren't nice, the vaccine is good, and that's about it. I did use the phrase Trump-like qualities to describe the old CEO of K2, but that wasn't political. But whatever, I get you. But actually I don't get you. What does your review even mean? It doesn't make sense. I'm guessing there are 100 other ways to say what you were trying to say to me, but you failed. You had one chance and you didn't do it. And leaving a comment that is clear is really the easiest thing to do. So I will stay out of politics, and you should stay in school. And while you're there, I want to send you a free beanie for that 1-star review of yours. Please shoot me an email with your address. I'm at mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I will send it over next week. I don't care if you like my opinions or rate me low. I'm happy to have you as a listener, and I hope that you listen every week. For everyone else, please leave a review. If I read it on the podcast, you will get a beanie as well. I'll take the good ones and the bad ones, and for those with bad reviews, please do better than this guy. That's the podcast for this week. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, ask you to subscribe and review me wherever you get your podcasts, and support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Rollerblade, Alonskis, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Have a great week, everyone.